The hidden wound of modern masculinity. Every man you have ever met is secretly exhausted. This is not the ordinary tiredness that follows a long day's work, but a profound, bone-deep fatigue that has been accumulating since childhood. It is the exhaustion of maintaining a performance that was sold to him as privilege but feels increasingly like a life sentence. He wakes each morning and immediately assumes the uniform of competence, modulating his voice to project calm, perfecting a handshake that communicates decisive strength, suppressing uncertainty beneath a facade of knowing direction. His daily existence becomes an exercise in alchemy, converting fear into action, vulnerability into silence, longing into achievement, and lust into socially acceptable conquest. From his earliest memories, he received a singular message: desire is dangerous unless properly channeled. The boy who cried became a sissy. The teenager who expressed emotional need became needy. The young man who hesitated became weak. Through this relentless conditioning, he learned to ration his humanity, sublimating his deepest impulses into professional ambition, financial provision, and stoic reliability. He became an emotional conversion machine, transforming the messy, human parts of himself into clean, productive outputs that society would reward. The modern masculine ideal presents itself as liberation, the freedom to lead, to provide, to protect. Yet beneath this narrative of power lies a profound burden: the responsibility to be relentlessly competent, emotionally contained, and perpetually in control. He must pay the mortgage without flinching, solve problems without complaining, navigate complexity without revealing confusion, and face threats without showing fear. This performance extends into every domain: the boardroom, the bedroom, the social gathering, even the therapist's office, where he often remains guarded, treating therapy as another problem to be solved rather than a space to be vulnerable. Beneath the tailored suit, the carefully cultivated gym physique, the dry humor that deflects rather than connects, and the playlist of alpha male motivation podcasts, there exists a screaming child. This inner child doesn't want more responsibility, more admiration, or more conquests. It wants, quite simply, to be told, just once, that it doesn't have to hold the world together. It wants permission to fall apart in someone's arms without being judged as weak, without being immediately fixed, without being billed for emotional labor. This is the paradox of modern masculinity: men are praised for being rocks, but rocks don't get to be tired, and they certainly don't get to crumble. This unaddressed exhaustion creates what psychologists call masculine deficit disorder, not a clinical diagnosis, but a cultural syndrome characterized by emotional starvation, performative overload, and a desperate, often unconscious hunger for regression. The more successfully a man performs his masculine role, the deeper this deficit grows, creating a vacuum that conventional relationships rarely fill. Partners, however loving, often expect him to remain the rock, perhaps with slightly more emotional expression, but fundamentally still reliable, still strong, still together. Friends maintain the same competitive banter. The world continues to ask for more. It is precisely this wound, this accumulated exhaustion and unacknowledged hunger for permission to stop performing, that the Siren archetype understands and exploits with surgical precision. She doesn't offer partnership, she offers cessation. She doesn't ask for his strength, she renders it irrelevant. In her presence, the elaborate architecture of masculine performance becomes unnecessary, and this very irrelevance is the core of her devastating appeal. What the Siren actually sells: the economics of regression. The Siren does not sell love. Love requires mutual vulnerability, reciprocal investment, and eventual integration of shadow selves, precisely what the exhausted man is trying to escape. Nor does she sell marriage with its contracts and compromises, or safety with its gentle predictability, or even particularly stimulating conversation that would engage his cognitive faculties. These offerings would require him to remain in his performing self, just in different costumes. What the Siren sells is total, merciless, euphoric regression. She offers a temporary but complete suspension of the masculine mandate. In her presence, a man is allowed, indeed, encouraged, to become pure appetite again. No performance reviews hover in the background. No 5-year plans impose their structure. No gentle, therapeutic inquiries about his feelings demand introspection. There is only the immediate, the sensory, the visceral, skin against skin, breath mingling with perfume, the dizzying sensation of falling off a cliff while someone whispers that the ground was imaginary anyway. This regression is not infantilization, but rather a return to a pre-socialized state of being where desire is not something to be managed but something to be experienced. The superego, that internalized voice of fathers, coaches, bosses, and society that constantly polices masculine behavior, is momentarily silenced. The relentless internal monologue evaluating performance, assessing risk, and planning next steps dissolves into white noise. What remains is ID, stripped of judgment, hunger, thirst, impulse, sensation. This explains why ordinary beauty is insufficient for the siren's purposes. A conventionally beautiful woman might make a man proud to possess her, she becomes another achievement, another testament to his competence and desirability. She enhances his social standing, she is proof that he has succeeded according to the rules of the game. The siren operates differently. A true siren makes a man proud to be possessed. His pride comes not from conquest but from surrender. His value is confirmed not by his ability to acquire her, but by her willingness to consume him. This reversal of the typical masculine narrative is both terrifying and irresistibly liberating. The siren understands that modern men are drowning in agency. They are required to be agents constantly, agents of change, agents of provision, agents of solution. What she offers is the vacation from agency. In her theater, he is not the director, nor even the lead actor. He is the audience, utterly captivated, and then he becomes the spectacle itself, consumed by her gaze. This dissolution of ego is not emasculating in the traditional sense, it is emancipating from the exhausting burden of having to constantly reconstruct that ego according to societal specifications. The psychological mechanism, the dopamine debt system. Male desire, particularly in its modern, commodified form, operates on what neuroscientists might call a dopamine debt system. The more forbidden, expensive, or statistically unlikely the object of desire, the higher the interest rate on the neurochemical loan. Each barrier, whether financial, social, moral, or logistical, doesn't diminish desire but compounds it. The brain interprets obstacles not as deterrents but as value indicators. If something is difficult to obtain, the reasoning goes, it must be worth obtaining. This evolutionary holdover once helped drive persistence in hunting and mating. In the modern context, it creates vulnerability to expertly crafted scarcity. The siren is a walking compound interest disaster for this very system. She doesn't merely trigger one reward pathway, she orchestrates a symphony of simultaneous neurological events that create a dependency more powerful than simple attraction. 1. Lust, immediate testosterone/dopamine spike. The visual and pheromonal cues trigger primal mating circuitry. Testosterone increases pursuit motivation, while dopamine creates the wanting sensation that is more powerful than the liking of eventual reward. Unlike ordinary attraction, the siren's presentation maximizes these cues through calculated aesthetics and movement, creating an immediate biochemical commitment. 2. Mystery, the what happens next circuit. The human brain is prediction obsessed. We derive comfort from anticipating outcomes. The siren systematically disrupts prediction through controlled inconsistency, selective revelation, and narrative gaps. This activates the brain's curiosity systems, involving the anterior cingulate cortex and ventral striatum, which release dopamine when pursuing answers. She becomes a living puzzle, and each interaction feels like discovering a new piece while knowing the full picture remains deliberately withheld. 3. Danger, adrenaline that paradoxically heightens pleasure. Whether social danger, reputation risk, emotional danger, uncertainty, or physical danger, the thrill of transgression. The presence of threat activates the amygdala and releases adrenaline and cortisol. In the controlled context the siren creates, this stress response doesn't trigger flight but rather intensifies focus and sensation. The body's warning system is hijacked to enhance pleasure, creating an intoxicating cocktail of fear and desire. The brain learns to associate her with this heightened state of being. 4. Ego dissolution, temporary relief from the superego. This is the most psychologically significant mechanism. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, self-monitoring, and social compliance, is temporarily taken offline. The constant internal narration evaluating performance, am I doing this right? What does she think of me? What should I say next, goes silent. This quieting of the superego is experienced as profound relief, akin to the mental silence experienced in deep meditation or flow states, but achieved through sensual overwhelm rather than discipline. The man doesn't just feel pleasure, he feels freedom from himself. Together, these pathways create a neurochemical cocktail more addictive than many street drugs because it is tied to the deepest, most archetypal fantasy in the male psyche, the fantasy of being consumed rather than consuming. In a culture that demands men be perpetual consumers, of resources, experiences, achievements, women, the opportunity to be the consumed object offers a paradoxical, transcendent release. The siren doesn't just offer sex, she offers sanctuary from the exhausting project of the self. The 3 layers of sirenry, a technical breakdown. Mastering the siren archetype requires understanding its 3 distinct layers, each building upon the last to create a psychologically total experience. Layer 1, the visual mirage. Men are often caricatured as shallow, but the reality is more specific. They are visually decisive in initial encounters and emotionally deep over long durations. The siren weaponizes those first 10 seconds with such brutal efficiency that the next 10 years of a man's attention are already mortgaged. She understands that initial visual processing happens in the limbic system, bypassing rational analysis, and she crafts an image specifically for this precognitive evaluation. Key principles of the mirage. Hyperfeminine contrast. In a cultural moment dominated by casual androgyny, yoga pants, messy buns, minimalist aesthetics, the siren employs exaggerated femininity as psychological warfare. The cinched waist, whether natural or engineered through corsetry, seam stockings, deliberate makeup, and cultivated hair create a stark contrast against the beige backdrop of everyday life. She doesn't blend, she protests visually. This contrast triggers novelty responses in the brain and signals deliberate, high-effort presentation that implies value. Asymmetry and slow reveal. Perfect symmetry is beautiful but often static. Asymmetry creates dynamic tension, the eye tries to resolve what is unbalanced. One shoulder bare while the other is covered, one glove on, one earring accidentally missing, a dress slit that reveals then conceals with movement. This technique exploits the Zeigarnik effect, the psychological tendency to remember incomplete tasks or images better than complete ones. The mind returns to her, trying to complete the picture. Color as psychoactive substance. The siren employs color not as decoration but as neurological trigger. Deep blood reds stimulate primal associations with vitality, danger, and fertility. Old Hollywood golds trigger associations with luxury, rarity, and bygone eras of glamour. Midnight blues evoke depth, mystery, and the nocturnal. These aren't arbitrary preferences, they are colors that measurably affect pupil dilation, heart rate, and attention focus in male observers. She dresses not for fashion, but for physiological impact. Movement as cinematography. Stillness invites assessment, movement commands attention. The siren never merely walks. She glides, suggesting effortlessness, sways, implying rhythm and body awareness, or prowls, indicating latent power and intention. Every gesture is framed, as if she is both the actor and director of a film playing in the observer's mind. This transforms observation from passive looking into active viewing. He is not just seeing her, he is watching her performance, which creates deeper cognitive engagement. Real-world calibration. The woman who enters a nearly empty hotel bar at 1 a.m., wearing a backless silk dress that seems to drink the low light, her hair in intentional, wet look disarray. She is not there for the cocktails. She is there because she understands that scarcity of context amplifies impact. When 10 heads swivel simultaneously, it's not coincidence, it's the mirage working exactly as designed. The environment has been sterilized of distractions, and she becomes the sole stimulus. Layer 2, the erotic theater. Once visual attention is captured, the siren shifts from image to experience. She understands a critical, often misunderstood fact: male sexuality is approximately 60% imagination, 30% tactile sensation, and only 10% genital activity. Most women focus on the 10%, the siren directs the 60%. Techniques of theatrical seduction. The almost touch. Neuroscience reveals that anticipation often generates stronger neural firing than consummation. By hovering her fingertips half an inch from his skin, along the jawline, the inside of the wrist, the back of the neck, she activates his somatosensory cortex as it attempts to close the gap. The brain feels the touch that isn't there, creating a phantom sensation more intense than actual contact. This technique transforms passive reception into active, imagined participation. Breath play without equipment. The exhalation is warm, moist, and carries her unique scent signature. When applied to the ear, proximity to the brain, the neck, a vulnerable, rarely touched area, or the inner wrist, where the skin is thin and sensitive, it triggers a cascade of responses. The warmth suggests intimacy, the sound of breath suggests closeness, and the airflow itself stimulates fine hairs and nerve endings. It is intimacy without permission, vulnerability offered through aggression. Vocal fry and subharmonics. The siren cultivates a voice that lives in the lower register, employing vocal fry, the creaky sound at the end of phrases, and subharmonics, frequencies below the fundamental pitch. These frequencies bypass the neocortex, the rational, analytical part of the brain, and travel directly to the limbic system and brainstem. The content of her words becomes secondary to their sonic texture. A simple, "I see you," delivered in this register feels like a physical disclosure, not a social observation. Choreographed revelation. Undressing is transformed from a utilitarian act into a ritual performance. Removing one stocking in exactly 45 seconds while maintaining unbroken eye contact isn't about efficiency, it's about controlling the narrative of revelation. Each second is a framed shot, the flex of the foot, the slide of fabric, the moment of bare skin emerging. This micro-event is so perfectly staged that it engraves itself in episodic memory. The man will indeed replay this 45-second clip for years, because it was designed as a memorable scene, not a mundane action. Layer 3, the emotional vacuum. This is the most psychologically sophisticated and devastating layer. After providing overwhelming sensual presence, the siren systematically withholds all forms of relational oxygen. She offers no questions about his childhood traumas, no jealousy to validate his desirability, no "where is this going?" conversations to provide narrative security. She is the five-star hotel that provides impeccable service but never asks the guest to fill out a satisfaction survey. The relationship, if it can be called that, exists entirely in the present indicative tense. This vacuum creates a phenomenon psychologists call intermittent reinforcement on steroids. Derived from B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning experiments, intermittent reinforcement occurs when rewards are given at unpredictable intervals. This schedule creates the most persistent behavior. Think of gamblers at slot machines. The siren masters this unpredictably. He never knows when the next text will arrive, when she might appear, when attention will be bestowed. So he checks his phone 87 times a day. Just as he convinces himself he's been forgotten, a single, cryptic emoji appears, a lipstick mark, a crescent moon, a pair of eyes, and his central nervous system lights up like Times Square on New Year's Eve. The cruel genius of the emotional vacuum is that it forces him to provide his own emotional content. He projects meaning onto her silence, imagines depth in her avoidance, constructs a fantasy relationship from the building blocks of her absence. She becomes a screen for his longing, and the less she provides, the more he paints upon that screen. The vacuum doesn't empty the relationship of meaning, it makes him pour his own meaning into it, ensuring his investment grows precisely because she does not reciprocate. This layer ensures that the experience remains addictive rather than satisfying. Satisfaction would allow closure, addiction demands perpetual return. The siren isn't interested in being a destination, she aims to be an irresistible, recurring loop. The siren's toolbox, a practical, annotated arsenal. 1. Scent signature. Choose a perfume with animalic base notes, real ambergris, rare and ethically complex, castoreum, from beaver glands, oud, infected agarwood resin. It must be prohibitively expensive and carry a faint taboo, a whisper of the animal self beneath civilization. The goal is olfactory imprinting. 3 years later, catching that scent on a stranger in an airport will trigger an instantaneous, unbidden physiological response. A memory stored not in the hippocampus, but in the amygdala and olfactory bulb. 2. The 72-hour rule. After the most intense, vulnerable, mind-altering night of his life, disappear completely for exactly 72 hours. No texts, no calls, no social media traces. This isn't about playing hard to get, it's about leveraging the consolidation effect in memory. During this silence, his brain will replay and reinforce the experience without new input, deepening the neural pathways. Scarcity doesn't just increase desire, it rewires memory, making the experience more central to his narrative of self. 3. The accidental nude. One meticulously curated photograph that appears to have been sent in error, a reflection in a foggy mirror, a silhouette against blinds, a décolletage framed by a robe held unthinkingly. The artistry lies in the suggestion of authenticity. Apologize profusely, "Oh my God, that was for my dermatologist. Never send another." The image becomes a relic, a piece of stolen intimacy that feels more authentic because it wasn't formally given. 4. The voice note seduction. An 18-second voice memo, recorded at 2:07 a.m. Volume low. The sound of ice clinking in a glass, a slow inhale, a soft exhalation that isn't quite a sigh. No words. This audio Rorschach test forces him to provide context. Is she alone? Thinking of him? Bored? Dangerous? The ambiguity is the point. It's a sonnet made of silence and implication. 5. The borrowed shirt maneuver. The morning after, wear his crisp white dress shirt, buttoned haphazardly, with nothing underneath. Make coffee. Let the sunlight hit just so. He will not wash that shirt. It becomes a sacred object, a relic infused with the aura of the experience. It is no longer a shirt, it is a shrine. 6. Public near exposure. At a formal restaurant, under the cover of a long tablecloth, slip off a shoe and find his calf with your bare foot. Gradually escalate the contact while maintaining flawless conversation with the waiter about wine pairings. The dissonance between your composed social self and your clandestine physical aggression is catnip. It demonstrates compartmentalization, a skill he respects, while offering him a secret, a conspiracy of two against the watching world. 7. The disappearing act. Master the art of vanishing at the peak of connection. In the middle of laughing at his joke, of leaning in for what seems like a kiss, simply turn and walk away. Not angrily, not disappointedly, but as if you've remembered a prior appointment with destiny. Leave only the fading echo of high heels on pavement and the ghost of your perfume in the air. He will spend the remainder of his night, and perhaps many nights after, trying to reconstruct the moment of rupture. His brain will seek closure it cannot find, ensuring you occupy his mental real estate long after you've physically left. The dark side, the cost of the archetype. To the man. Financial ruin, the Siren trade is priced in experiences, not goods. Private jets to Mykonos, spontaneous purchases of watches he cannot afford, investments in her projects, and ultimately, divorce settlements that dismantle a lifetime of accumulation. The money isn't a point, the willingness to burn it is the proof of surrender she requires. Reputation collapse, the powerful man becomes a cautionary tale. The respected father is seen stumbling out of a nightclub at 4 a.m. The trusted executive makes inexplicable decisions. Social capital evaporates as the community witnesses his captivity. His credibility, built over decades, becomes collateral damage. The permanently shifted benchmark, after experiencing the Siren's particular brand of psychosensual intensity, ordinary relationships feel like decaf. The gentle, steady love of a good partner can seem dull, lacking the addictive peaks and valleys. His dopamine system has been recalibrated, making him a refugee from normalcy, forever comparing the quiet comfort of real love to the devastating fireworks of his regression. To the siren herself. Chronic ontological loneliness, no one ever sees the woman behind the performance. She is adored as an archetype, but unknown as a person. The very skills that create her power, compartmentalization, emotional withholding, theatrical control, prevent genuine connection. She lives in a gilded cage of her own construction, worshipped but never known. Inability to transition to ordinary love, she has trained herself, through thousands of repetitions, to view male devotion as a special effect she triggers through technique. When presented with genuine, unmanipulated affection, she often doesn't recognize it, or worse, finds it contemptible in its artlessness. Her professional skills become relational disabilities. The inevitability of aging out, the siren's power is inextricably linked to physical prime and the cultural capital of youth. Few retain the archetype's potency past 40 without evolving. Some transition into the Black Widow, leveraging accumulated resources and psychological mastery for more overt power plays, often destructive. Others, the rarest, evolve into the Muse, channeling their understanding of male psychology into inspiring creativity rather than exploiting dependency, finding a form of immortality through art they inspire but do not claim. The siren's natural predators. 1. The destroyed man who learned, he has already paid the price. He has lost the fortune, the family, the reputation. He recognizes the signs not with judgment, but with the weary recognition of a survivor spotting landmines in a once familiar field. He is immune not because he lacks desire, but because he can now anticipate the cost with visceral clarity. The siren's magic requires the illusion of endless consequence-free exploration. He knows the consequences are real, and they have his name on them. 2. The genuinely asexual or aromantic male, a statistical rarity, but a complete blind spot in the siren's design. Her entire arsenal is built to trigger specific neurological and psychological pathways related to sexual and romantic pursuit. If those pathways are absent or differently configured, she is merely an interesting performance. He might admire her artistry as he would a skilled magician, but he feels no urge to participate in the trick. Her power depends on hooks sunk into existing hunger, she cannot create the hunger itself. 3. The younger, hotter siren in training, this is the most Darwinian threat. The aging siren faces the brutal mirror of a newer, fresher version who has studied her playbook and updated it for a new generation. This confrontation is often not direct, but existential. She sees her methods reflected back, sees men's eyes drift, and understands that her power was always temporal, leased from culture and biology, not owned. The modern mutation, the digital siren. The internet has democratized and industrialized the siren archetype. Platforms like OnlyFans, Instagram Close Friends, and encrypted Telegram channels allow a 22-year-old with excellent lighting, an understanding of angles, and a talent for calculated absence to extract five-figure monthly allowances from men she will never meet. The principles remain identical: visual mirage, curated photos/videos, erotic theater, live streams, personalized content, emotional vacuum, limited DMs, unpredictable responses, only the medium has changed. The most successful digital sirens understand a critical principle: never show full nudity. They show the promise of it, the almost, the next time if you're good. They sell not content, but anticipation, not imagery, but imagination. This is scarcity engineered at scale. While a traditional siren might have one or a few patrons, the digital siren can manage hundreds, each believing in a unique connection, because the interaction feels personal even when it is systematized. This digital evolution has created what sociologists call the intimacy economy, where attention, fantasy, and simulated closeness are directly monetized. The digital siren is perhaps the purest entrepreneur of the 21st century. She sells an experience that costs her nothing to reproduce, scales infinitely, and leaves the customer not dissatisfied, but perpetually wanting more, ensuring recurring revenue. How to walk the path without losing your soul, a guide for the conscious siren. If one chooses to employ these powers, understanding it as performance art rather than identity is the thin line between mastery and damnation. Compartmentalize ruthlessly, maintain a private life, real friends, real hobbies, a real name, that no target ever sees. This isn't just about secrecy, it's about psychic survival. You must have a self to return to when the performance ends, otherwise the performance becomes the self, and that self is a prison. Maintain the dichotomy, have a legal name and a siren name. Never let them bleed. The siren name is a mask, a role, a character. When you take it off, you must be someone else entirely. This ritual separation helps maintain psychological boundaries. Financial pragmatism, save the money. Sirens flame out, wise sirens retire to vineyards in Tuscany or launch legitimate businesses or fund artistic pursuits. The money is not just payment, it is your future freedom. Convert ephemeral attention into tangible assets. The exit strategy, have an expiration date in mind before you begin. Whether it's an age, a financial goal, or an emotional milestone, know when the curtain will fall. The most tragic sirens are those who cannot imagine a third act, who try to play the same role long after the audience has changed. The final warning, never fall in love with your own reflection. The moment you begin to need their worship for your own self-esteem, you have lost the game. You have become addicted to your own drug. The siren's power lies in her ability to bestow the gift of regression. When she needs the resulting adoration, she is no longer bestowing a gift, but begging for payment, and that shift in dynamic is instinctively felt. Conclusion, the eternal paradox. The siren is the only female archetype that does not ask a man to become better, richer, kinder, or more evolved. She does not ask him to build, to provide, to protect, or to improve. In fact, she asks him to become nothing, just a pulse in the dark, a hunger without a name, a helpless moan that echoes in a carefully constructed void. And because every man, underneath the uniform and the achievements and the accumulated exhaustion, secretly wants to become nothing for a little while, to lay down the terrible burden of constant becoming, she will never run out of worshippers. She is the vacation from masculinity that no man can book on Expedia. She is the drug that feels like freedom but leaves the addiction of dependency. She is the most honest lie the female gender ever invented, honest about his hunger, deceptive about her own. And as long as men are required to shoulder the world, to perform competence, to convert their humanity into utility, there will always be a woman somewhere, adjusting her lipstick in a dim mirror, preparing to offer them the sweetest, most temporary, most ruinous form of mercy they will ever know, the permission, however brief, to stop being a man, and simply be.